Welcome to WasteExpo 2025. It's great to have you all here this morning. You know, we're off to a great start already. Last night, we hosted our NWRA Awards Gala, and we recognized our drivers and operators of the year. We inducted 5 new members into NWRA's Hall of Fame, and we are ready to kick off a great WasteExpo with the show opening here shortly. This morning, I'm super excited to introduce these next 2 gentlemen. Patrick Dovigi. Patrick is the founder, president, and CEO and chairman of the board of directors of GFL Environmental Incorporated, a Canadian multi-sector environmental services company headquartered in Vaughan, Ontario. In 2007, Patrick had a vision to create a company that is a one-stop shop provider of environmental solutions. Since then, drawing on the discipline he learned in his earlier hockey career, Patrick has driven GFL to become the 4th largest environmental services company in North America. Patrick has instilled an entrepreneurial culture in GFL's leadership team with a focus on operational excellence, sustainability, and safety as core values. In 2017, Patrick was recognized by Waste 360 with a top 40 under 40 award and in the Entrepreneur of the Year Ontario Awards as Entrepreneur of the Year in the power and utility sector. Patrick is also driven by a passion to give back to charities in our host communities. In addition to being a regular supporter of charities supporting local family and health initiatives, in 2019, Patrick contributed $5 million to help create the Dovigi Family Sports Medicine Clinic, a first-of-its-kind sports medicine research and care facility providing support to individuals with sports-related injuries. Patrick is a devoted father of 5 children and currently serves on the board of directors of the Toronto General and Western Hospital Foundation. This next gentleman will be interviewing Patrick. Michael E. Hoffman is the president and CEO of the National Waste and Recycling Association. He has been an active member of NWRA for several years and is a veteran of the sector with decades of environmental industry financial experience. For more than 38 years, Hoffman's focus has been the waste and recycling industry, having most recently served as Stifel's managing director and group head of diversified industrial research. Hoffman has been recognized for his expertise and contributions to the solid waste, recycling, and environmental services industry by being inducted into NWRA's Hall of Fame class of 2020. Michael is also the 2001 owner-rider winner of the 105th Maryland Hunt Cup, is an errant golfer, an avid fly fisherman, and he's a heck of a shot as well. Hoffman holds a Bachelor of Science Engineering from Widener University and a Master's of Business Administration from Cornell University. Please join me in welcoming Patrick and Michael to the stage. Thank you. Good job, Patrick.
Good morning, everyone. Deja vu, we're back again. Yeah. I appreciate the fact that both of you actually wore a sport coat for me yesterday, though. Yesterday was about the investment community, the state of the market. Today's about Patrick. I think everybody would love to know who Patrick is. Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. How does a guy from Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario get in the garbage business? Who are you growing up?
I grew up in a small town in Canada, in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, which borders Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. 2 parents, grandparents immigrated from Italy.
Most people start with 2 parents, just for the record.
Both parents moved to Sault Ste. Marie. Both my grandparents, on both sides of them, moved to Sault Ste. Marie for work, to work at Algoma Steel. When people immigrated after the Second World War, they came from Italy. They came from Italy by boat, landed in Halifax, and some people ended up in New York. A lot of people ended up in Toronto. And then some people continued on to sort of Northern Ontario, into Sudbury, into Sault Ste. Marie. Sudbury, more of a mining community, largely around copper, and Sault Ste. Marie is more of a steel town. So grew up in Sault Ste. Marie. Obviously in Sault Ste. Marie, one of the big things you do is you have to play hockey. Ended up being
Are Canadians really born with hockey sticks in their hands?
skates.
Skates. All right, skates. Okay.
And then the stick comes second. And grew up there and, ended up being a very good hockey player.
Do you have brothers and sisters?
One sister.
Yeah.
Was, I would say, my biggest cheerleader because she got dragged to the rinks with me. And then ended up moving to Southern Ontario, sort of around the GTA when I was 14 because I'd outgrown, my abilities in Sault Ste. Marie, and that's how I sort of moved to Southern Ontario. So parents dropped me off, moved in with a billet family in the Greater Toronto area.
To play hockey?
To play hockey.
Did you actually go to school?
Yeah.
Kinda.
My mother only had one rule. She's like, I don't care about hockey, but you need to finish school. So
Okay.
If you don't finish
I've met
school,
your mother.
Yeah, my mother.
Yeah, no, I met your mother. I would be afraid.
She was definitely, she was tough. Loving, but tough.
Yes.
But, so then, ended up staying in Toronto and then decided, when I was 21, 22 to effectively want to hang up the skates.
But you played professionally, didn't you?
Played professionally.
Who'd you play for?
Drafted by Edmonton and then traded to Detroit. And then, bounced around the minors and realized that wasn't the life that...
And what position?
I was a goalie. So very strategic.
So you like being in a business that things are tough?
Yeah, I listen. You learned a lot from professional sports, obviously.
Yeah.
How to build a team, what makes a team work. It's not just always about having the best players. It's about finding the right people from the right place.
All right, so I got to ask this because I'm missing my front teeth. Do you have all your teeth?
Every single one. That was the good part about being a goalie. Never got hit.
Right. So what was on your face mask?
I don't know. I had multiple different masks.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so 21, you get out of playing hockey, you realize that's going to be a long, hard slog, playing in the minors. Yeah. What happens next?
So, when I was playing hockey, I thought I was rich, right? I was 18, 19 years old. I was making pretty good money. So when I decided to quit, my father basically gave me one rule. He basically said, all that money you made from hockey, I'm taking, and you're going to have to go be clear with the kid, find a way to make a living. You're going to go to school like everybody else. I'll pay for your school, but you're on your own if you want to quit. He wasn't very supportive of the decision of quitting.
In anything?
Yeah, in anything, but particularly hockey. He had a big passion towards hockey. I think he wanted to play hockey, but he'd been working since he was 13 years old because that's what
he was playing. He was playing hockey.
He was playing hockey through me.
Yeah.
But then I quit. Went back to school, and then through a guy that I actually played hockey with, introduced me to a fund that basically managed $500 to $750 million of capital, and they basically invested in a couple of different things. One being environmental services.
So equity investors or debt investors? I mean, was it like mezzanine financing, or what was it?
Mostly loaning to own.
Yeah.
They would always lend you just enough where they were going to own some form of equity sort of in your business.
Right.
And I ended up going to work there when I was, at the same time I was sort of putting myself through school. And one of the assets that I got stuck in to go and run was a waste transfer station and a hauling business. So
you used the word stuck.
Yeah.
Because at the time you're like, that wasn't a good thing?
No, it was a good thing, but it was a great asset with a terrible operator.
Okay.
And, I think...
So that was the big Toronto MRF, wasn't it? Or
it was a big Toronto, it was a hauling business and a recycling facility in Toronto.
Toronto.
And it was a transfer station. I mean, they had 6 trucks, not a big thing,
right.
But it was a large site. The landfill had closed in Toronto. This operator opened a transfer station right next to the landfill. So a huge amount of volume instantaneously post 2002.
Yeah, like 250,000 tons kind of thing.
Yeah, it was almost 200,000 tons a year going through the facility.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There's a little bit of backstory there too, isn't it? I mean, terrible operators, didn't they abscond with some assets and disappear? And
basically what he did was, a waste transfer station, I think he missed the word transfer. So he kept bringing waste in, piling it up. And, we thought we were perfectly covered. The land was worth a significant amount of money. The truck was a great operating business, but effectively backfilled the site with a couple 100,000 tons of waste, collected the receivables and left.
So you got to do the workout.
So that happened I never forget, it was Thanksgiving in Canada 2004 was the day that we actually foreclosed on the site. And that's the day the actual site went up in flames. So that was my...
Literally flames?
Literally flames, yeah. The first truck we loaded...
Did somebody throw a match in, or...?
That was the thesis. Again, I was Italian. The previous owner was Italian. So everybody thought that we tried to light the site on fire, but it was actually the worst possible thing that could have ever happened. No, effectively, we loaded the first truck. The waste had been sitting there, basically composting and combusting.
Oh, so you just pulled it.
We grabbed the bottom of the pile, oxygen hit the bottom of the pile, and the entire site went up in.
Yeah, you had elevated temperature. Ooh,
Correct.
Yeah.
And it burned for 5 to 6 weeks. It was not a pretty site. And we were putting almost 250,000 gallons of water on that waste.
So what burnt down, the transfer station?
I mean, everything was outside, so there was nothing to burn.
Oh, okay, so it's just the pile.
200,000 tons of waste sitting outside.
You can't put that out. You just have to basically control it.
No, yeah, it was pretty messy.
Yeah. But it's an effective way to get rid of the waste.
So the beauty of that is, silver lining in that whole thing is they actually did not want to be in the waste business anymore.
Your employer.
The fund said, no, we got to get out. We'll give you the asset, do whatever you want with the asset. We'll fund to help clean the fund, but we want this off our balance sheet. We don't want to have any responsibility.
So are you an employee of your fund doing that, or are you now going?
And effectively, I said, well, I have nothing to lose. I mean, 0 of 0, 0.
Yeah.
What's the worst that could happen? So I basically ended up taking the asset.
And that was the beginning of your education in the waste business?
The waste business, yeah.
So I've heard stories of you sitting in the scale house for days and days at a time and talking to everybody who drove by, and you just, that was part of your education for several years.
I mean, I ran the scale. They couldn't afford the scale. I ran every sort of inbound truck and every outbound truck we reopened, and met every single driver and understood how the business actually worked. And, I understood like what all the different sites were that they were using, what they liked about them, what they didn't like them, what they liked about the companies they were working for, what they didn't like about the companies they were working for. So it was, I think, the best part about the waste business is if one of those drivers haven't, heard a rumor by 9, they start one by 10. So you learned a lot by sort of sitting there and talking to them.
Just chatting with them. It's like sitting in a barbershop or being a bartender.
An espresso and a donut goes a very long way with a driver.
Yes.
So
yeah.
When they have options of where they could dump their waste, again, Waste Management back in the day would say, listen, you can dump at any one of these sites in this proximity, right? So we provided donuts and espressos and barbecues, and we ended up moving our waste from like 350 or 400 tons a day to 1,000 tons a day, and the site became, extremely profitable.
So talk about you managed to get this back on its feet. You get through the controversy. That's 2004 or 5. When does GFL become a GFL as the light bulb of we should do a GFL?
Yeah, so I think through that opportunity, Toronto was an interesting place because it was one of those markets you could actually get into without actually owning a landfill. Because of the
Well, that's sort of the Canadian market anyway, isn't it?
But in a real way, Toronto was like, how are you going to add value? And I saw the value in controlling a lot of volume on the street and being able to leverage the amount of landfills that existed in Detroit.
Right.
Republic Waste Management, Veolia at the time, everyone had a very large landfill on top of all the local landfills.
$15 a ton.
And when the local landfill in Toronto closed, all that volume was going to Michigan.
Right.
Disposal back then was anywhere between sort of $8 and $11 a ton.
Yeah.
So everybody was bidding for that waste. And I saw value that we could create a real business in Toronto, control as much volume as we could on the street, and then eventually sell it to them because then we're going to be able to internalize.
What's the transportation number on top of the 11? Another 50?
It's about back then it was about $1,000 a load, and $1,000 a load divided by 35 tons. Yeah, so it was about, there was probably $30 to $35.
Yeah, so because the Toronto market was 65 to 75.
65 to $75.
Right, yeah. So there was an arbitrage there anyway, even having to ship that distance.
Yeah, so that was the thesis, was to build a business 5 to 10 million of EBITDA, largely around controlling as much disposal as we could at the time.
So you started with how much EBITDA on just the transfer station, the MRF, and the 6 trucks?
$1 million.
Right. So a little bit of M&A, or did you do it organically?
M&A. So we started buying all the smaller independent transfer stations that existed.
And were you leveraging your existing cash flow, or is that when you started?
So then I realized I needed, $5 to $10 million. Again, through another contact at my hockey days, introduced me to his father, and I met a fund that managed money on behalf of one of the big Ontario pension funds, which was Healthcare of Ontario Pension Plan. I walked in for an hour, sort of pitched my idea, and the guy goes, "I'll give you $10 million, but you got to spend it by the end of 2007." So
What I think we've learned about you in the last 17 years.
Yeah, we deployed that capital very fast.
You have no problem spending money.
No. So, it was amazing, right? Because 2007 was the heyday. They didn't, people was like, they had use it or lose it funds. They had to spend the money had to be deployed.
Right.
And then it was quickly thereafter, that the world started getting shaky in the sort of spring of 2008.
Right. So what was the name of the company that you took over?
It was originally called 310 Waste, which then became Waste Excellence.
And then how did you come up with Green for Life?
I don't know if you remember, there was a website called Kijiji. Kijiji was like an open marketplace back in the day.
Yeah.
And I literally put an ad out, and I said, basically, it was a marketing student that I paid $1,500 to. And I said, I need something that's green because I can't do landfill. Can you come up with something? Can you come up with something, a logo? And for $1,500, he basically came up with the logo and came up with the color.
So the logo we know today is still the original logo?
Still the original logo, yeah.
And the green, did that marketing person pick the green, or did you pick the green?
So the green, we picked a Pantone of a green, but then we called in PPG. And I said, I really need sort of the ugliest and brightest color green that's
started with ugly.
Green.
Yeah.
And they brought me a bunch of sort of, of different colors. And I said, I need to brand this color. This has to be, licensed and branded for GFL and GFL.
So how many gallons did you have to buy for them to rename it green?
They basically said I had to have a minimum of 1,000 trucks, at which they didn't believe we would ever get 1,000 trucks.
So how quickly did you get to 1,000 trucks from the point you started that conversation?
2013, we had 1,000 trucks.
All right, so 6 years. So it's in 2013, when you go to PPG now, it's
that's a
GFL green.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You left your phone back there. How did you get a GFL green phone cover?
There's a large Asian population in Toronto that has every color.
We'll do anything you want. Okay.
Anything you want.
Okay, so you established the Green for Life, GFL. What's the series of first acquisitions you're doing?
So again, the premise was, controlling as much volume on the street,
right,
and then creating basically, I looked at the Veolia model. I thought the Veolia model wasn't really replicated in Ontario.
Describe what you think the Veolia model is, because at that point, it's still a solid waste business.
It was solid waste, but they had environmental services,
right,
as well.
Right.
In Europe, not in North America. It was largely just solid waste.
Well, they actually did, and then they spun out what became advanced disposal. And
advanced, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, they sold Veolia into what became advanced disposal, yeah.
And, basically we looked at it and said, listen, there could be a one-stop, how much volume can I control? Both on sides. And if I'm going to cross-sell, what was the ability to cross-sell? Because, again, how would I ever compete against Waste Management or BFI Canada at the time, who were the large players in the Toronto market? We need to differentiate ourselves. And, through that opportunities, again, we bought, first transfer station was a site in Pickering, which is east part of the city. So the strategy was get sites across the entire city, east, west, north.
So if we look at a clock as Greater Toronto Area, where was the original asset in the clock?
Furthest to the east.
Furthest east?
Yes.
So you're going to continue to densify around your original
Around
asset.
the east, and then obviously we wanted one sort of central, we wanted one in the south,
right,
and then we wanted one sort of in the west. That was the plan, and then we could create a one-stop shop for our customers, create just an opportunity for them to dispose at any one of our sites across the entire city to make their fleets more efficient.
And your single point of aggregation was still the original transfer station, or were you adding? Okay, so
we started with one, and then the plan was to acquire a bunch of other mom and pops. So we acquired that one, acquired another one in February of 2008, and then so we had two, and then we were looking for other opportunities, and and then as I was looking for waste streams to go into the transfer stations, I was driving around on other sites, and next door there was this, beautiful site, tanks, vac trucks, significant amount of waste, and I saw a whole bunch of tractor trailers leaving the site full of waste, and I'm like, where are they going? Trucks going?
Yeah. So did you follow them?
I just went and knocked on the door, and I said, can I speak to the owner? I speak to the owner. His name was a guy by the name of Bob Munshaw, nicest guy you'll ever meet. Passed away a couple of years ago, and Bob stayed with us until, basically he was an employee until the day he passed. But he was the nicest guy I knew, and he said, listen, I've been fighting with my neighbors forever, so I just don't give them the waste. But, if you give me a fair price, I'll bring you all the waste. And, he had the tune of like 300 tons a day of sludges that were going out to landfill.
Water treatment sludges, things like that.
Well, he was taking wastewater treatments and solidifying basically the wastewaters with sawdust and making sort of a sludge, which was hugely intensified, which ended up making our transfer station hugely profitable because we were taking those wastes. Remember, you think about when you're loading a tractor trailer going to landfill, we were taking that very dense waste, putting it on top of the the waste that we were already sending to landfill.
Yeah.
We were maxing out our trailers at 42 and 43 metric tons going to Michigan. So it obviously made significantly more money at the transfer station. And one day he said, hey, listen, I don't know, I had this company, Safety Clean, come and knock on my door. They want to buy me. Can you sort of just like explain to me the process? I know you acquired a couple of recent businesses. I don't know anything. Sort of got into the numbers. I said, well, I should be the buyer of this business, not sort of Safety Clean. And we did our first liquid waste deal. We actually closed that transaction on September 30th, 2008, like in the middle of
right in the middle of the Great Recession.
Yeah, right in the middle of the, we signed the deal on September 1st and closed on September 30th.
But he's in a business that should be relatively stable too, because you're doing wastewater treatment, sludges and what have you. So it
was very stable, but there was still a macro feeling for that period of time that, but again, I was too young to know any different. I didn't really understand the risk of what it was. And again, 0 was zero.
Same money source backing you at that point?
Yeah. The model was working and they agreed to give me an incremental 20 million to go in.
Did they put a gun at your head again about the speed at which you spend it?
No, they were very happy actually. Again, the model was working, right? And the model was working. We figured it, we figured out something that,
So your original plan was to bulk up enough EBITDA to turn around and flip it to the bigger buyer.
Yep.
When do you get to that point where you go, maybe there's a better option?
It was interesting at that time because in Toronto, particularly, the BFI Canada was doing, a pretty aggressive roll-up, right? So you could sort of just watch exactly what they were doing and where they were going. And then they made, I would say, an unfortunate mistake, which is when they actually bought the IESI business in the US, and I think took their eyes off the prize in Canada, which was, the jewel, I think, of what they had. And I think, they were just very fixated on going southbound. And then 2008 happened, and we eventually got a blank canvas in Canada. Even at that time, Waste Management sort of retreated to the US. The US got hit significantly harder than Canada.
Right.
Our banks were very stable. The housing market was very stable. Canada just sort of chugged along.
You have a very different mortgage structure too that left that stable.
There was no financial crisis. There was no housing crisis. Canadian banks were very well capitalized. And then we had a very good run between 2008 and 2010 where we sort of deployed that incremental capital and grew to the point where we grew the business to, almost 30 to 35 million of EBITDA, significantly in excess of what our expectations were.
Right.
Now, I had my private equity partners.
Same one though, you're still in the same one.
Same one.
Because the important comment of this is the first and only unicorn in the waste business, in my opinion. I'm defining a unicorn as start with small, then go medium, large, and big in private capital. Yeah. And sort of that growth strategy. And this is part of the cool story anyway. So
what I learned pretty quickly was your private equity partners are your best friends until they made 3 times their money.
Yeah, and then they went out.
I pounded the table very hard because we had a bunch of inbound interest to buy the business around the thesis that we thought. And I basically had a partner that, I founded the business with that gave me the original money and said, listen, I'll give you 30 days to go and find the money to
replace them.
Not replace. He said, sell down a bit, I'll roll, but to continue rolling out the plan and not just Toronto, because I said there's a big opportunity in Western Canada as well. We saw a big opportunity in Western Canada. And then I met Jeffrey Keenan, who again was the original founder of IESI that sold to BFI Canada.
Yep, that's Rourke Capital.
And Rourke he came in and basically looked at the business and he sort of put a term sheet in front of us that, gave us an incremental $105 million of capital. I've never thought in my wildest dreams that someone would come and put a term sheet in front of us and give us $105 million of capital to go and, expand our business into Western Canada.
And that was a industrial liquids expansion or a solid waste expansion?
So the original opportunity was on the liquid side, and then we were able to back into building the solid waste business behind the liquid waste. So the reverse of what we did in Toronto, we did in Western Canada. We bought a company called EnviroWest, had a lot of presence from basically Manitoba all the way to British Columbia.
Right.
And then we're able to build, the solid waste business behind the liquid environmental services.
So you're still only in the collection business too, collection processing.
Only in collection and processing.
Yeah. When do you get your first landfill?
Our real first landfill really came in where we actually took the plunge was in I mean, there was one when we bought the maritime assets from Waste Management. So that was Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, New Brunswick. And then we built a business, and then we bought, we carved out the Matrec business from Transforce,
Right.
which was a publicly traded trucking company, still in business today. They had this orphaned. It was a very good waste asset.
But it was in Quebec. That was in Quebec, yeah.
People are always a little bit nervous of Quebec because of the language barrier. But it was, from our perspective, was run by an exceptional management team that is all there today, still headed by the same guy, Dave Richmond. And it was a high margin business in a great market that, really was just Waste Management had done an excellent job of consolidating. There was one other sort of large independent, which ended up selling to Waste Management. So it was a great market that was fully vertically integrated.
Was that triggered by the RCI transaction they did that forced them to have to do some divestments, and that's how you got that?
No, Transforce owned it, RCI sold to Waste Management.
Yeah.
There was no divestitures that came with that, but, then basically just effectively there was, the two of us with another private company. There was only, which was called EBI, which is still in business today,
right.
which is owned by the family and the large pension fund in Canada called the Case of the Depot.
So you've leveraged something I think it's interesting because I can relate to it from, I've ridden competitively my whole life. Horses have opened doors for me all over the world. Your hockey background has opened fascinating doors for you. So does hockey come to play in going into Quebec and being able to bridge languages and what have you? Because Canadians love their hockey and they sort of...
I mean, there's always a great conversation piece to sort of open a door. And obviously, I think where our focus has been on acquiring family owned and operated businesses. We have bought a few from sort of private equity over the years, but by and large, where we relate to both culturally, and myself has been sort of family owned and operated.
And most of those have some portion of that stays with you, what I'm hearing.
I mean, listen, I think, in those days, we were able to afford sellers liquidity, the ability to roll equity. And most importantly, listen, a lot of these family owned and operated business, they want their people taken care of.
Right.
And we needed their people, and I think a lot of time what we spent was on culture because at the end of the day, that team had to become the GFL team. And were they going to be able to buy into the systems operations, buy into what they believe in the same vision that we had? And,
right.
When I go back and look at all the acquisitions that we've done, I mean, coming up on almost 300 today, the ones that went the best were the ones where I call it the Joe Montana to the Jerry Rice was done perfectly, where the family passed the torch to us, they were supportive of the transaction, told their employees why they wanted to do it, why they selected GFL to buy their business, and those ones worked the best. And then the ones you always went in, you knew there was a little thing, but it was a great asset. Those were the ones that always took a little bit longer to get them where we needed to be, and needed a lot more work than the others, where culturally just people believed in the same vision that we were trying to create.
So let's progress. So you go your original capital to Rourke Capital. Again, when did you hit that? All right, I'm ready to take my money out and make that next move. And the next move is pretty substantial because the caliber of that capital I think changed.
So again, same thing happened again. We've grown the business to sort of almost 90 to 100 million of EBITDA under,
and this
the watch of
this is
Rourke.
2000 what?
This was 2014.
So have you gone into the public debt markets at that point?
We did. We did our first public debt offering in 2013.
So it's an interesting aspect. So I covered the public debt when I was still in Wall Street because there was publicly disclosed financials. And I got to know the business as a result. So that's the first time you're actually now having to talk to the investment community on a regular basis.
Yeah, and we created a discipline as if we were a public company because we were quarterly reporting, doing quarterly calls, which had its pros and cons. So again, I created that extra layer of discipline. 2014.
The cons are he had to talk to me.
Yeah, 2014 comes around, and the same thing happened. The investors had made, again, 3 times their money again. We needed more capital. At that point, we were in the middle of doing the Matrec deal. Because we knew that opportunity was going to exist, and had to find a group that was going to be able to allow us to do the Matrec deal, and then eventually start, because that was going to give us coverage in 10 provinces in Canada. Eventually, we were going to have to move to the U.S. and have the capital to move to the U.S. Right. So again, and made a deal with Rourke. Went to a friend of mine that I had met through another mutual friend, and I said, "Listen, I want to recap these shareholders out again. Just the size of the funds kept moving up." And he says, "Listen, I need to write a minimum of $350 million check. What are we going to do with the money?" So ended up buying out Rourke. The original partners took out their original capital and actually ended up rolling again.
And which fund was this?
So that was a company called HPS, which is still a large investor in GFL.
And that's the private equity, used to be the private equity group of JP Morgan, if I remember correctly.
Correct.
Right.
It got carved out under Dodd-Frank.
Right.
Yeah.
So now we're on to the third capital stream. But one of the things I think is important in this story, and there's a couple observations. You are, as today, in 2025, have the largest equity ownership of one of the publicly traded companies. That's not a con against the other public companies because of the nature of their growth. They ended up in the public markets very early in their life cycle, and there's that dilution down. But so are your employees.
Yeah.
Talk about that and the influence of that in the business model and part of the success of that.
Listen, that's the beauty of. I think that's the beauty of private equity. I mean, you actually learn how to create equity value, not just pick up waste, right? So it's like, what decisions are you making? How are you allocating capital? How does that? And when you're levered at 5.5 or 6 times, not at 3, you don't have the luxury of having a significant amount of incremental free cash flow. So you need to spend every dollar wisely. And I think that discipline that was created over and over and over again. And I go back to 2007 with our original management incentive plan. No one knew what that management incentive plan was. They took it out. What's this? It says options. I don't know, whatever that is. 2010 comes around, we do the first recap. First recap, everyone's getting checks for $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, dollars.
Or roll it into the next one.
Roll it in, but the way they were set up is you basically had to take the liquidity. The guy buys a Corvette, buys a new boat, and he's like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
And then we start going through the economics of it all. Again, where should we allocate capital? Do we need the newest, shiniest, brightest trucks in this yard versus another yard? Where we're going to put our trucks? Is that transaction? Is that the most accretive for our dollars? Are we going to get the most synergies around that? We're buying for this. We're rolling in for this. We're going to own it for this. We can sell it for X, right? And that drives a return. And that discipline is still within the organization today. Because a lot of that management team is the exact same management team that grew up under private equity, and they think about it the exact same way. And we've been shit on a lot over the last 5 years as a public company because we did things that others haven't done. Now, at the end of the day, have every one of those decisions paid off? Yes. So we take the bullet, but from some of our public investors that didn't like us taking up leverage to do, for example, I use this example because it's top of mind. When we were in the middle of COVID, we bought an environmental services business from a private equity firm in Canada. No American private equity sponsors could get into Canada because the borders were closed. That business was hugely impacted.
This is TerraPure. Birch Hill owned it. They were trying to sell it. A European infrastructure fund was going to buy it. Canadian government says no.
No.
They're number 1 in environmental services in Canada.
We were number 2.
And you bought number 2. Which one, I don't think you could have gotten the deal done in the United States from the FTC standpoint. The government let you, and now it's, my example would be the market share difference of a Stericycle and medical waste is the relative example of now what your business looks like in Canada.
Yeah, but we bought that business for 7.5 or 8 times, put it together with ours. It was a $250, $300 million EBITDA business on a combined basis. We grew that to 500 over the last 3 years and sold that business for, 15, 16 times.
Sold 55% of it, or 50.
Yeah, sold 55% of it, put $6 billion in our pocket. And,
right.
Now we're really smart. The stock goes up, but we were really stupid 3.5 years ago when we did that.
Well, yeah. So let's bridge you're 2014. You're bringing HBS. That's round 3. You still have one more round to do, but and HBS has stuck with you through all this. But in 2014, was the exit strategy still always a sale, or were you teasing in your mind that you might be a public company?
I think 2018, we always thought, listen, from my perspective, I always thought there was more value to be created privately than publicly. Right. Just to run the business the way we were growing the business so quickly, and, at such a large CAGR, it's hard for the public market to sort of follow along with that. So as long as we could stay private, we did. That being said, as we continued getting larger, the recaps started getting more difficult, right? You needed consortiums. There was, one private equity firm couldn't do it. There was no continuation funds back then. So there was just different, but in 2018, we basically decided, hey, we think now is the time we were actually going to go public.
But you've rotated your 4th private equity in by then.
Not yet. That's when we had to make a sort of pivotal decision.
Okay.
The IPO got leaked in 2018. And then we were approached by, a number of private equity firms and sovereign wealth funds and pension funds.
Right. There's basically a group of 3.
Yep.
came together. And did they take HBS out, or did they just added incremental capital and diluted them?
They took out a portion of them and they rolled a portion as well.
Okay.
And which was great because, I think they shared the same vision we did. I said, this is going to be my last private capital recap, and then we're going to go public, and you have to be comfortable owning a public equity. And at that time, we already knew that there was going to be a transaction with Waste Industries. The Poole family, who had, control over the asset, shared the same vision that we did. They didn't want to sell to, if they didn't have to one of the other sort of three majors. They wanted to build they thought there was a real opportunity to build a solid number 4 or 5 in the US. Combining their platform with our platform,
All right.
was the
So
logical.
I want to back up a little bit, though, because your first entry into the U.S. was not that business. So talk about the business in Michigan that you bought and some of that experience, because not everything's perfect.
Definitely not. I mean, for most of you that know this, we bought, in 2016.
That's your first entree into
It was
the
our
US.
first acquisition in the U.S. And I think about that business, it was really an extension of Canada. It was on the border of Windsor, Ontario.
So this is
we
the
were running it
marketplace you were
effectively out of
going in.
Windsor.
Yeah.
And, but it was our first foray into the U.S. The owners and founder of that business, we spent a lot of time with them. He'd been very aggressive, similar, acquisition strategy to us. He'd been very successful at providing great service at a great price. Municipalities loved them. He was providing great customer service that they thought they weren't getting from their previous service providers. We went ahead with that business, and we knew the private equity sponsor that owned it pretty well. Actually, Jeffrey Keenan's son from worked at Kinderhook.
Yep.
That was the relationship. We bought that business. We thought it was a great business. 15 days after we bought the business, one of the founders of the business was arrested by the FBI for paying kickbacks allegedly paying kickbacks to certain municipal officials in exchange for, favorable contract terms and etc. So that wasn't a fun time, I would say. For us, basically, spent a lot of time in Michigan.
You spent a lot of time personally on the ground holding the hands
Luke
of
was
everyone.
here today. Me and Luke spent
Raise your hand, Luke.
about 8 months driving around Michigan. We covered every square inch of every mile in Southeast Michigan. But it shows the resiliency of the business because, I think we grounded the employees. We went and visited every single municipality. Turned out, that the 2 municipalities and townships where he allegedly paid the bribe or the kickback said, the guy's an idiot. He paid the wrong person. If he wanted more favorable contract terms, he should have paid this other guy. So we learned that. But if you keep providing the same service at the same price, we're happy to keep you. We did. And
You lost almost none of the businesses.
we lost none of it. We didn't lose one contract.
Yeah.
Which was a testament to the business. And, I think that opportunity provided us to think about things differently. It obviously thought about how we were going to go in the U.S., where we're going to go to the U.S., and again, what diligence you do. I've never seen that happen in Canada. I never thought it would sort of happen in this sort of day and age, but it happened. We dealt with it, created a great opportunity for us to expand the business in a wonderful market in sort of Michigan. And yeah.
Okay, so your feet are wet in the United States. That's 16. But I think the transformational shift of who this is a growing and significant Canadian company with a finger in America is Waste Industries.
It was Waste Industries.
700-ish million in revenue, 200 million of EBITDA. At the time, in the debt market, and it looked like it was a wow valuation because everybody had the wrong numbers. But talk about, because I'm going to embarrass the heck out of him because I think he's in here. I think I saw Greg Yorston. You got Greg Yorston as part of that deal. I think that's a big deal about what happens next. Talk about that.
Listen, we paid 11 times for that business back in the day, which people thought was a big number. Now, again, from my perspective, it's like buying a piece of land or buying something. It's like you can buy a piece of land, you think you overpay for the land, and 10 years later, you didn't overpay for the land.
Right.
From my perspective, if you have a long-term vision, and we knew what the vision was and what we were going to do with the asset, some of the best deals we ever did were the ones we paid the most for. At the end of the day, and I go back to this, if we wouldn't have paid to get into the market, paid up for that asset, bought a world-class asset with world-class assets, best-in-class operators, and I sort of said this yesterday, They had a very good playbook of how they took 23% margins to made them 30% margins. And what did they do and all the reasons why, which we talked about yesterday that we don't need to rehash. That hub has served as the platform for us to go and do everything we've done in the US, right? So if we didn't have that hub, we would have never been able to do WCA. We would have never been able to do the ADS WM, waste management
carve
out. Never been able to do Sprint. We would never been able to do all these. So yes, maybe it looked expensive on the face of it, but I had shareholders, and people that bought into, hey, this is the vision. We're going to buy down this multiple. We're going to do this through X, Y, and Z. And, again, the track record sort of spoke for itself. We always delivered on what we said we were going to do, and they believed in us. And I think if you sort of look at that today, it sort of played out, sort of perfectly. And we have a wonderful business today in the US. And if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't be able to do it. And I think if we and again, we go into every acquisition, we take the best management practices out of anything we buy. And we took a significant amount of best management practices out of Waste Industries to make our Canadian business significantly better.
Right. So there's a couple of pieces I want to tease out here. First, again, we're covering the publicly traded debt and the financials are available. We saw this and wrote it up as this was transformational. It was going to truly change the direction. But it also brought, as you've said, all of these core disciplines. Didn't it bring some incremental capital too? Does Macquarie show up here at some point in this process as well? Because Macquarie was part of the ownership with
Macquarie was brought in we brought in Macquarie back in 2014, 2015 with HPS to do the Matrec deal. And then we actually bought them out.
Of WIN. But I think one of the things that Paul Mitchner's always been noted for is that they, as a private equity, are always big on, we want you to invest in infrastructure to make your company stronger. Because one of the things...
Macquarie was a great company to buy things from.
Yeah. Because they
were less focused on M&A and they thought about things, utility-like, infrastructure-like, where they deployed a lot of capital into building great assets, whether that was recycling facilities, landfills, transfer stations.
And systems, all the back office.
And all the back office. And they did, did they get the highest return on their waste assets? Probably not.
Right.
Could they have made money if they did things differently? Probably. But they built great businesses.
Right.
And, Waste Industries was a great business. And, WCA over a long, they were in that for a long period of time, but they deployed the dollars that they needed to hand us what I would say was a wonderful asset.
Well, and I think the significance of this is roll-ups fail because infrastructure is not there to support the true integration and capture the synergies, and you've got too many financial systems, blah, blah, blah. And you're on one platform early.
Always have been since the beginning.
Early.
Since the beginning. We moved out, we had one operating platform for solid waste, one operating platform for environmental services, one accounting system, one HR platform, one procurement program, one pricing. That's been the model from day one. That was non-negotiable. Everybody came over onto one platform because we had to be able to measure and monitor what we bought. If we couldn't do that, we were going to fail.
Okay. So let's leapfrog. 18, you get Waste Industries. I keep saying WIN because that was the publicly traded ticker when it was traded. So you get Waste Industries. You try going public in the fourth quarter of 2019. That, for a lot of reasons, I think the way the transaction was pushed into the market, they didn't fully understand your Canadian public markets. But you go public in an interesting period. 6 days before the pandemic, before we were all declared we ought to go home, they went public. What was that like, getting public in that market and then having to maintain a relationship with a new investor class?
I think, listen, we listened to bankers in terms of a deal structure in 2019. I think we learned really quickly that structure wasn't going to work.
Right.
It was certainly not going to work to maximize the price that our private equity sponsors wanted to maximize. So we learned that pretty quickly. There was a bid-ask discrepancy in 2019. Not going to point fingers, but it was what it was. I was actually saying that I have nightmares about seeing In-N-Out Burger when I drive by. Luke and I, after the end of the IPO, we decided to pull it. We went to In-N-Out Burger in San Francisco, and I said that's the last time I've been to an In-N-Out Burger. But basically what I did is I got the list of everybody I went to, and I literally personally flew to the 20 largest accounts, and I said, what is it going to take to get this company public? What do you want to see? What do you want to see in terms of a structure? And I literally brought a book and I wrote down exactly what we wanted to do. And I basically built the book myself around the bankers. and then called the bankers back in early February. I said, when our audit's done, we're going to go launch the IPO. Here's the book. The IPO is done. We raised $3 billion. They sort of looked at us and said, you're full of shit. You didn't do that. I said, okay, well, you can call. Here's all the PM's names. Here's their numbers. Call. We're going to launch this as soon as our audit was done. And we did. And I will say, that's when the pandemic was actually hitting. And I mean, we were on the road. We launched the IPO, and every day the market was down 300, 400, 500 points. And all but one account sort of reneged on what they had sort of written in the book. And we were able to launch a successful IPO, close the IPO on March 5th, 2020. We were the last people to ring the bell on the New York Stock Exchange before, the pandemic hit. And sort of basically 5 years later, sort of here we are today.
Well, 5 years later, you've tripled the size of the business.
Yeah. The plan was to double the size of the business. People looked at us cross-eyed when we said that, but we said that opportunity exists. We can do that responsibly. We can do that within the leverage targets that we've suggested. And, I think it's worked out pretty well. And, we've kept the core business sort of public, and, the things that the public investors didn't love about the business, we've been able to sort of carve off and still, get our high from the private equity type model and sort of leverage profile and growth profile in the environmental services business now, as well as the, infrastructure business that we had as part of the public company. And it's been a big learning curve. It's been a huge learning experience for us. We've learned lots of things. We've had to learn how to be a public company. It doesn't happen overnight. You have to transition over and to think about how the public investors think versus how we thought as sort of being under private equity ownership for a long period of time. But I think we figured it out, and I think we found the happy medium now and the balance between what we need and what the public investors need, and what I need to maximize my own equity value.
And today you are basically publicly owned and employee owned, and the private equity is essentially gone.
Yeah, private equity still owns whatever 15 to 20%.
Yeah,
but they're significantly less influential than they were in the past.
So talk a little bit about the culture today and how you were able to maintain that culture all the way through this very rapid pace. But you got to the size you are in a time frame that took the other three public companies 20, 25 years to do. You did it in half that time.
Yeah, I think, again, start with the base, make sure that, I always say it's like building a house. The foundation has to be solid. And I think we built a solid foundation with operating systems. And then, I think we think about it again, think big, but act small. And we built this business like an actual regional business. And we found the best regional operators for that business. And I don't profess to know more than Dave Richmond knows about Quebec in the Maritimes. I don't profess to know more than the Habits know about the Carolinas. So we found the best people to sit in the best seats, that were local people that have run those businesses forever, that had the ability to share in a bigger sort of vision. And I think that's been the success of it. And, again, the private equity training creates sort of an entrepreneurial spirit. Listen, we breed winners. We want to win at the end of the day, no different than any other thing. We go out to win every day. And that comes in all sort of forms and fashions. But ultimately, I think people want to be associated with success. The model works. It has worked for a long period of time, and as much as shit as people have thrown at us over the years that it wasn't going to work, I think we've defied all odds and proved that it does work. And to the point where I get certain people coming out saying, "Yeah, we actually get that wrong," and that's it's been good. And again, we've just consistently always put our head down, done the right thing. You got to believe in what you're building, and you got to believe in the vision that you have, and you can't listen to what everybody else can tell you, because everybody has a million different opinions. But at the end of the day, we knew what we were doing. We know what we want to do. And I think from where we sit today, this is just the beginning.
Right.
We're not, by any stretch of the imagination, stopping here, getting complacent with what we've done so far. That's why we keep pushing every day. We find ways to create value, whether it was spinning out ES, whether it was continuing building value in GIP, within the existing business now, giving the tools, with the right leverage profile, being able to execute on a whole bunch of M&A, deploying capital into RNG, EPR. Again, no one's sort of sitting around doing nothing. We're not happy with where we are. We want to be better, and we continue to be better. And again, we have a goal to just being sort of the best run environmental services business and waste management business that exists in North America. And I think, we're a lot closer than we were when we started, and a long way to go. But the best part about this whole thing is we have youth on our side throughout the organization. And, I'm only 45. So, I mean, if I was able to do this in, 16, 17 years, what are we going to be able to do with this platform over the next 16 to 17 years?
All right, we're near the end of our time, so we're going to have a little fun here. Lightning round. Last book you read, fiction or nonfiction?
No books.
No books?
Just financial statements.
Go-to place to get away?
I'm big on Italy.
Surprise?
Yeah.
Okay.
Best food, best cars, best clothes.
What's that?
Best food, best cars, best clothes.
That's true. Movie you would watch again and again?
Rudy.
Very good. And who's on your music playlist?
No music.
No music? You don't read and you don't listen to music?
No music, no.
Oh my goodness. All right, we've had a great time talking to you. Thank you very much, Patrick.
Thanks, Mike.
And everybody enjoy the show. We'll see you in Washington, D.C., I think is the plan, in May of 2026, and then the following year, 2027, back here, same week, WasteExpo, NWA, and Informa Waste 360, a new partnership going ahead. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.